The moment my father said, "We need to reconsider the future of Carter Industries," I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just sat there at the long glass table, my hands resting calmly, while every eye in the room shifted toward me. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Cold. Distant. Like I wasn't his son anymore. I let out a slow breath and leaned back slightly. "Reconsider?" I asked, my voice steady. That's an interesting word to use in front of the entire board. No one laughed. No one even reacted. That's when I noticed Daniel standing beside him, not sitting, not surprised, just watching. Waiting. I turned my head toward him. "You knew about this?" He gave a small shrug, almost polite. "It's not personal." I smiled faintly. "It's always personal." My father didn't look at me. That hurt more than anything. "Jason Carter," he said, using my full name like I was a stranger. "Recent performance concerns have been raised." I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't show it. I just nodded slowly. "Performance concerns?" I repeated. "That's funny. Because last quarter, I closed the largest deal this company has seen in 5 years. A few board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke for me. Not a single one. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "So let's not pretend this is about performance. Just say it clearly." My father finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "We believe it's time to explore other leadership options." The words landed heavier than anything I had expected. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I did. Completely. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. "Other options?" I repeated softly. "You mean him?" I tilted my head toward Daniel. He didn't deny it. He didn't even react. That confidence, it wasn't natural. It was prepared. Planned. I turned my gaze slowly across the room. "So this is already decided." Silence answered me. That was enough. I leaned back again, letting my fingers tap lightly against the armrest. "You could have told me privately," I said. "Saved yourselves the drama." Victoria stepped forward slightly, her voice smooth. "This is a corporate matter. Transparency is important." I looked at her, really looked this time. The way her eyes held mine, steady and unbothered. She wasn't just part of this. She was behind it. I gave a small nod. "Of course. Transparency." I repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Then I let out a soft chuckle. "You've been transparent enough." My father frowned slightly. "This isn't a joke." I met his gaze again. "No," I said quietly. "It's not." I straightened my posture, feeling every pair of eyes still locked on me. "So tell me something," I continued. "When did you start planning this?" My father didn't answer. Daniel finally spoke. "You're overthinking it." I looked at him, my expression calm. "Am I?" I asked. "Because this doesn't feel sudden. This feels arranged." He smirked slightly. "Maybe you just got comfortable." I held his gaze for a second, then nodded once. "Maybe." I paused, letting the silence stretch just enough to make him uneasy. Then I spoke again, quieter this time. "Or maybe I trusted the wrong people." That hit. I saw it in his eyes, even if just for a second. Victoria stepped in again, her tone sharper now. "This discussion is over." I turned my attention back to her. "Oh, I know," I said. "It was over long before I walked into this room." I stood up slowly, adjusting my jacket. No sudden movements. No anger. Just control. "You didn't call me here to discuss anything," I continued. "You called me here to make it official." My father's voice came out firm. "Jason, sit down." I looked at him for a moment. Just a moment. Then I shook my head. "No," the word came out simple, but it carried everything I wasn't saying. "If you're removing me," I added, "at least have the decency to finish it without pretending I have a say." I picked up the folder in front of me, glancing at it briefly before placing it back down. "You've already made your decision," I said. "So let's not waste each other's time." I turned slightly toward the door, then paused. Something in me didn't want to leave just yet. Not like this. I looked back at Daniel. "Enjoy it," I said quietly. "You worked hard for this." He smiled faintly. "I will." I nodded once. "I'm sure you will." Then I looked at my father again. For a second, I almost said something else. Something real. But I stopped myself. There was no point. Not anymore. So I just gave a small, controlled smile. "You should have trusted me," I said. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. That told me everything I needed to know. I turned and walked out of the boardroom without another word. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it sounded louder in my head. Final. I stopped in the hallway, staring straight ahead as my reflection stared back at me from the glass wall. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned. Every step, every move, every silence, it all led to this moment. I let out a slow breath and straightened my shoulders. All right, I murmured to myself. Now I understand. And for the first time in my life, I realized something I should have seen long ago. I wasn't being replaced. I was being removed. The first thing I noticed wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Too quiet. A file I had approved last week was suddenly missing from the system. I stood in my office staring at the screen, scrolling again. Nothing. I picked up my phone and called Olivia. The Jensen contract, where is it? There was a short pause. It should be in your folder. It's not. Another pause. Longer this time. That's strange. I leaned back in my chair, eyes narrowing. Yeah, it is. I hung up without saying more. That same day, I walked past the conference room and stopped mid-step. Voices inside. Daniel's voice. And my father's. I checked my watch. That meeting. I was supposed to be in it. I reached for the door, then stopped. No one had called me. No message. No reminder. Nothing. I stepped back slowly, my jaw tightening. So this is how it starts, I muttered under my breath. That night, I met Logan at a quiet bar downtown. He looked at me for a second before speaking. You look like you finally noticed. I frowned slightly. Noticed what? He let out a small breath, leaning forward. They're cutting you out. Slowly. I shook my head. No, that doesn't make sense. Logan didn't argue. He just held my gaze. Missing files. Closed meetings. Decisions happening without you. My fingers tightened around the glass. Coincidences. He gave a short, dry laugh. Jason, this isn't high school. People like your family don't do coincidences. I didn't respond immediately. My mind kept replaying the same moments. The missing contract. The meeting I wasn't invited to. The silence. I finally looked at him again. You think this is planned? He didn't hesitate. I know it is. I exhaled slowly, staring at the table. And Daniel? Logan's voice dropped slightly. At the center of it. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. No, I said quietly. Not him. Logan didn't push. He just said one thing. Then proved me wrong. The next day, I didn't go to my office. I walked straight toward the executive wing. I wasn't invited, but that didn't matter anymore. As I got closer, I heard voices again. I slowed down. Victoria's voice this time. Smooth. Controlled. It's already working, she said. Daniel answered, calm and confident. He hasn't noticed yet. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed still. Give it a little more time, Victoria continued. Once the board starts questioning his performance, it's over. Daniel let out a quiet chuckle. He won't even see it coming. I stepped closer to the door, my hand clenched into a fist. Victoria spoke again, softer now. Just make sure the financial report goes through before the next meeting. That will finish it. There was a pause. Then Daniel said, and after that? Victoria didn't hesitate. Then he's out. Silence filled the hallway around me. My mind went blank for a second. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood perfectly. This wasn't just about replacing me. They were setting me up. Slowly. Carefully. Making it look like I was failing. I stepped back from the door, my breathing steady but heavy. So that's the plan, I whispered to myself. I didn't go back to my office. I went straight to my father. His office door was open. He was standing by the window looking out at the city. I walked in without knocking. We need to talk. He didn't turn around immediately. I'm busy. I closed the door behind me. This won't take long. He finally turned, his expression neutral. What is it? I held his gaze. Why am I being removed? There was no shock on his face. No confusion. Just silence. I took a step closer. Missing documents. Meetings without me. Reports being changed. My voice stayed calm, but there was weight behind every word. This isn't random. He sighed slightly, walking back to his desk. You're overthinking it. I shook my head slowly. I heard them. That made him pause. Just for a second. Victoria. Daniel. I continued. They're setting me up. He didn't deny it. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I stared at him, waiting. Say something. He finally sat down, folding his hands. This is how business works. The words hit harder than anything else. I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Business. I repeated. I'm your son. His expression didn't change. You're part of the company. That was it. That was the line. I stood there for a few seconds just looking at him, trying to find something, anything. But there was nothing. No regret. No hesitation. Just cold logic. I nodded once, slowly. Got it? My voice came out quieter than I expected. I turned toward the door, then stopped. So when this is done, I said without looking back, what am I to you? He didn't answer. I didn't wait for one. I opened the door and walked out. As I stepped into the hallway, everything felt different. Not heavier. Not darker. Just clearer. Logan was right. This wasn't random. This was planned. Every move, every silence, every missing piece, it all led here. I stopped walking, staring straight ahead. They think I'm blind, I said quietly. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, calm, but not the same. I straightened my shoulders, adjusting my jacket slightly. All right, I murmured. Now I see it. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, careful, designed. And that made it even more dangerous. I let out a slow breath, my expression settling into something steady. If this is how they want to play it, I paused for a second, my lips forming a faint, controlled smile. Then I'll let them. The moment Marcus Reed placed the file in front of me, I knew something was wrong. Not because of what was inside, but because of how everyone was looking at me. Silent. Waiting. I picked up the document slowly, flipping it open. Numbers. Transactions. Missing funds. I let out a quiet breath. This isn't right. My voice stayed calm, but I could feel the tension spreading across the room. Marcus didn't say anything. That was the first sign. I looked up at him. Marcus, you reviewed this? A small pause. Then, yes. No explanation. No defense. Just that. I nodded once, closing the file gently. Then explain why my signature is attached to transfers I never approved. A board member leaned forward. That's exactly what we want to hear. I met his gaze. Then listened carefully. I didn't authorize any of this. Another voice cut in. Convenient. I turned slightly, my expression steady. Truth usually is. No one backed me. Not one person. That silence said more than any accusation. I placed the file back on the table and leaned back. Let's not waste time pretending this is confusion, I said quietly. This was set up. A few murmurs spread across the room. Daniel spoke then, calm and controlled. That's a serious claim. I looked at him, holding his gaze. So is fraud. He didn't react. He just walked forward slightly, hands relaxed. The numbers are clear. The funds are missing. And your authorization is on every document. I tilted my head. And you're presenting this like you just discovered it? A faint smile touched his lips. I'm presenting facts. I let out a small breath, almost amused. No. You're presenting a story. He didn't answer. That told me everything. I turned my attention back to Marcus. You've been our lawyer for years, I said. You know how I operate. Marcus avoided my eyes. The evidence is difficult to ignore. I nodded slowly. So you're choosing the evidence over the truth. His silence confirmed it. I looked around the room again. Interesting. A board member spoke again, sharper this time. This isn't a debate. This is about accountability. I leaned forward slightly. Then hold the right person accountable. No one responded. Not even my father. That hurt more than I expected. Daniel stepped closer to the table, his voice steady. The company can't afford uncertainty right now. I glanced at him. And you're the solution? He didn't hesitate. Someone has to stabilize things. I gave a small nod. Of course. I let the silence stretch for a second before speaking again. So this is the part where you step in as the hero. A few board members exchanged looks. Daniel didn't react. I'm stepping in as someone who cares about the company. I smiled faintly. That's new. His expression tightened slightly, but he recovered fast. This isn't personal. I looked at him carefully. It stopped being personal the moment you made it look like I was stealing from my own company. That hit. I saw it in his eyes, even if just for a second. Then it was gone. Replaced by calm confidence again. We're here to fix a problem, he said. Not argue about it. I leaned back again, my fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. You're right, I said quietly. The problem is already fixed. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? I held his gaze. It means you already got what you wanted. He didn't answer. Sophia Bennett stepped closer to me then, her voice low but firm. This isn't over. I glanced at her just for a second. Her eyes were steady. No fear. No hesitation. I gave a small nod. I know. But deep down, it didn't feel that way. I could feel everything slipping. The board was already leaning away from me. Marcus had chosen his side. My father hadn't said a single word in my defense. And Daniel, he was already taking control. I stood up slowly, adjusting my jacket. No sudden movements. No anger. Just calm. If the board believes I'm responsible, I said, then there's nothing more to discuss. A board member spoke quickly. So you're not denying it? I looked at him. I already did. He didn't respond. Of course he didn't. I turned slightly toward the door, then stopped. Something in me didn't want to leave like this. Not without saying it clearly. I looked back at Daniel. Enjoy the position, I said quietly. You worked hard for it. He met my gaze. I will. I nodded once. I'm sure you will. Then I looked at my father. For a moment I thought he might say something. Anything. But he didn't. Just silence. Cold and final. I let out a slow breath, my expression settling into something steady. That's all I needed to see, I said. I walked out of the boardroom without waiting for a response. The door closed behind me and for a second, everything went quiet. Too quiet. I stopped in the hallway staring straight ahead. My reflection in the glass looked back at me calm, but different. Failed deal. Missing funds. Mismanagement. I murmured under my breath. I let out a small humorless laugh. Perfect. Every piece had been placed exactly where it needed to be. Every move calculated. Every outcome controlled. I straightened my shoulders slowly. The anger was there, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't reckless. It was cold. Focused. This wasn't a mistake, I said quietly. This was designed. I looked at my reflection again, my eyes steady. All right. A faint smile formed, controlled and sharp. If this is how they want to play it, I paused for just a second, letting the realization settle completely. Then it's not just betrayal anymore. My voice dropped slightly, calm but certain. It's war. I slammed the glass against the table harder than I meant to. This is insane, I said, my voice low but sharp. Logan Hayes didn't react right away. He just watched me calm like always. That made it worse. They just framed me in front of the entire board, I continued, pacing in front of him. You expect me to just sit here? Logan finally spoke, quiet but firm. Yes. I stopped. Turned toward him. You're joking. He shook his head slightly. You're reacting, they're planning. The words hit harder than anything else that day. I stared at him for a second, my jaw tightening. So what, I just let them win? Logan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. No. You let them think they already did. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. That sounds like losing. He tilted his head slightly. Only if you don't know what comes next. I didn't answer immediately. My mind was still burning from the boardroom, from Daniel's calm face, from my father's silence. I can expose them, I said finally. Right now. Logan shook his head again. And then what? They deny it. They bury it. You look desperate. I clenched my fist slightly. So I do nothing? He leaned forward now, his voice sharper. You stop playing their game. Silence filled the room for a second. Then he added, quieter this time, you start playing yours. That made me pause. I sat down slowly, the anger still there but quieter now. Explain, I said. Logan didn't hesitate. They've been planning this for months. Every move calculated. Every step controlled. I nodded once. I know. He continued, so if you react now, you're just confirming everything they want the board to believe. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a second. That I'm unstable. Logan gave a small nod. Exactly. I exhaled slowly, my thoughts starting to shift. So I disappear? He shook his head. No. You step back. I looked at him again. There's a difference? A faint smile crossed his face. A big one. I stayed quiet, letting the idea settle. Step back. Not run. Not fight. Just wait. And while they think I'm done, I said slowly, I watch. Logan's eyes sharpened slightly. Now you're thinking. I let out a small breath, my shoulders relaxing for the first time since the meeting. All right. I paused, then added, let's say I do this. What's the first move? Logan didn't hesitate. You make it public. I frowned slightly. Public? He nodded. You resign. Calmly. Cleanly. No drama. I stared at him for a second. You want me to hand them the win? Logan's expression didn't change. I want you to make them believe they already have it. I leaned back again, thinking it through. It sounded wrong. It felt wrong. But it also made sense. And after that? I asked. Logan's voice dropped slightly. Then you take everything back. The next morning, I stood in front of the press with a calm face and steady voice. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed toward me. Jason Carter has decided to step down from his position, I said clearly. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but I didn't hesitate. This decision is in the best interest of the company. A reporter called out, Are the allegations true? I gave a small, controlled smile. The company will move forward, I said, ignoring the question. Another voice followed, Do you admit responsibility? I adjusted my jacket slightly. I believe leadership requires accountability. That was enough. They took it how they wanted. That was the point. I stepped away from the podium without another word. No anger. No defense. Just silence. Exactly how Logan said. As I walked past the cameras, I could feel the shift. They weren't chasing me anymore. They were already moving on. Good, I murmured under my breath. Keep looking the other way. Later that day, I sat in my apartment, the city quiet outside. My phone buzzed. Olivia Brooks. I answered immediately. Talk to me. Her voice was low. You made the right move. I leaned back slightly. Tell me something I don't know. She paused, then said, There's more going on inside than you think. My expression sharpened. Start talking. She hesitated for a second. Daniel has been signing off on internal transfers for weeks. I sat up straighter. Transfers to where? Another pause. That's what I'm trying to find out. I nodded slowly. Keep digging. She added quietly, Victoria is involved. That didn't surprise me. Of course she is. I ended the call and sat there for a moment, staring at nothing. Pieces were starting to move. Days passed and I stayed quiet. No public statements. No reactions. Just watching. Listening. Collecting. Olivia kept feeding me information, small at first, then bigger. Daniel approved another transfer, she told me one night. Different account this time. I frowned slightly. He's getting sloppy. She hesitated. Or confident. I leaned back in my chair. Same thing. Another day, another call. Victoria met with someone outside the company, Olivia said. Late night. Private location. My eyes narrowed. Who? Still working on it. I nodded once. Find out. Each piece added something new. Each detail made the picture clearer. Daniel wasn't just replacing me. He was building something behind the scenes. And Victoria, she was guiding it. But the biggest realization came when I looked at the approval chain. My fingers paused over the screen. No way, I whispered. I checked again. Same result. My father's name was there. Not once. Not twice. Multiple times. I leaned back slowly, my expression hardening. So this goes deeper. My phone buzzed again. Logan. I answered. You see it? He asked. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. There was a pause. Then he said, Now you understand why you couldn't react. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I said quietly. Now I do. I stood up, walking toward the window, the city lights stretching out in front of me. They think I'm out, I said. Logan's voice came through calm. Good. I let out a small breath, my reflection staring back at me from the glass. They think I lost. Logan didn't respond this time. He didn't need to. I already knew. I adjusted my jacket slightly, my expression settling into something sharper. Let them think that, I murmured. Silence wasn't weakness. Silence was control. And for the first time since everything started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. The first time I saw the pattern, I thought I was overthinking it. I stared at the screen, scrolling slowly through transaction logs Olivia Brooks had sent. Same structure. Same timing. Different accounts. I leaned closer, my eyes narrowing. This isn't random, I murmured. My phone buzzed. Olivia again. I answered immediately. Tell me you see it, Olivia said. I see something, I replied. But I want to hear what Olivia found. A short pause. Daniel Carter has been moving money through internal approvals, splitting it across smaller accounts. I exhaled slowly. So Daniel Carter doesn't trigger alerts. Exactly, Olivia said. And every transfer is technically clean. I leaned back slightly. Technically. Another pause. There's more, Olivia added. My expression sharpened. Say it. Victoria Hale signs off on the external contracts tied to those transfers. I let out a quiet breath, my grip tightening on the phone. So Daniel Carter moves it. Victoria Hale cleans it. Yes. I stared at the ceiling for a second. And the board sees nothing. Olivia didn't respond. That silence was enough. I spoke again, quieter now. Send me everything. Already done, Olivia said. Be careful. I gave a small nod. I always am. But even as I said it, I knew this was bigger than anything I had expected. I spread the documents across the table, connecting pieces one by one. Transfers, contracts, approval chains. It all lined up too perfectly. Too clean. You planned this well, I muttered under my breath. My phone buzzed again. Logan Hayes this time. I answered. Tell me you found something useful. I glanced at the documents. Useful isn't the word I'd use. Logan's tone shifted. How bad? I let out a slow breath. Daniel Carter isn't just taking my position. Daniel Carter is building something behind it. Silence. Then Logan asked, and Victoria Hale? Running support, I replied. Covering every move. Logan exhaled sharply. And the board? I shook my head slightly even though Logan couldn't see. Blind. Or pretending to be. There was a pause. Then Logan asked the question I didn't want to answer. And Richard Carter? My hand froze over one of the documents. I stared at the signature line. Clear. Undeniable. Still checking, I said quietly. Logan didn't push. Keep digging, Logan said. I will. I ended the call and sat there staring at the name again. Something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't just that it was there, it was how often it appeared. Too consistent. Too involved. I picked up another file, flipping it open quickly. Same result. Signature after signature. No, I whispered. My chest tightened slightly. This doesn't make sense. I stood up, pacing slowly across the room. You wouldn't do this, I said under my breath. But the evidence didn't care what I believed. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Jason Carter. A familiar voice responded. Come. Measured. You finally started asking the right questions. I froze. Marcus Reed. A short pause. Good. Jason Carter recognizes the voice. I narrowed my eyes slightly. You had a lot to say in the boardroom. None of it helped. Marcus let out a quiet breath. That wasn't the time. I scoffed slightly. Funny. It seemed like the perfect time to defend the truth. Marcus didn't react. Truth is rarely that simple. I leaned against the table, my voice lowering. Then explain it to Jason Carter. Silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke again. What Jason Carter is looking at isn't the full picture. I frowned slightly. That sounds like an excuse. It's a warning, Marcus replied. There are layers Jason Carter hasn't uncovered yet. My grip tightened on the phone. Then start talking. Marcus paused again, then said something that stopped me cold. Not everyone involved is acting freely. My mind raced. You're saying someone's being forced? I'm saying Jason Carter should be careful who Jason Carter assumes is the enemy. I let out a slow breath. You should have said that earlier. Marcus didn't respond. Why now? I asked. Because time is running out, Marcus said. And because Jason Carter is closer than Jason Carter thinks. The line went silent. Call ended. I stood there for a moment staring at the screen. Not acting freely, I repeated quietly. My eyes drifted back to the documents spread across the table. My father's signature stared back at me again. Clear. Unmistakable. But now, it felt different. Not just betrayal. Something else. Something deeper. I picked up one of the files, running my fingers lightly across the page. What are you hiding? I whispered. Before I could think further, my phone buzzed again. Logan. I answered. Marcus just called. Logan's voice sharpened immediately. What did Marcus say? I glanced at the papers again. That not everything is what it looks like. Logan was quiet for a second. That's vague. Yeah, I said. But it changes things. Logan exhaled slowly. Or it complicates them. I nodded slightly. Same difference. I walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. There's more going on here than Daniel Carter taking control. Logan's voice dropped. You think someone bigger is involved? I didn't answer right away. My eyes stayed fixed on my reflection in the glass. I think I don't have the full board yet. Logan let out a small breath. Then get it fast. I nodded once. I will. Before I could say anything else, another call came in. I looked at the screen. Private line. I switched over. Jason Carter. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. You took your time. My entire body went still. Eleanor Carter. My voice came out quieter than expected. I was waiting, Eleanor said calmly. I swallowed slightly. For what? A short pause. Then, for Jason Carter to stop reacting and start thinking. I let out a slow breath. I'm already there. A faint shift in tone. Almost approval. Good. I glanced back at the documents. Then tell Jason Carter what's really going on. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Not yet. My jaw tightened slightly. Then why call? Her answer came sharp and clear. Because the game is about to change. I frowned slightly. It already has. No, Eleanor replied calmly. It's just beginning. Silence stretched between us. Then she added, softer this time, Jason Carter was never meant to fight this alone. My grip tightened on the phone. Then where were you? Another pause. Longer this time. Watching, Eleanor said. Waiting. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them again. For what? Her answer came simple. For the right moment. I stared at my reflection again, my expression steady but sharper now. And this is it? Eleanor's voice didn't change. Yes. I exhaled slowly. Then what's the move? A faint pause. Then, now, we take everything back. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the city lights, replaying Eleanor Carter's voice in my head. Come. Certain. Like none of this had surprised Eleanor Carter. By morning, I was already dressed, standing in the same place when the call came again. Jason Carter is ready? Eleanor Carter asked. I exhaled slowly. Jason Carter has been ready. Pause. Then, good. Then come to the old office. I frowned slightly. That place is closed. Not everything that looks closed is gone, Eleanor Carter replied, then ended the call. I drove there without thinking twice. The building looked abandoned from the outside, but the moment I stepped in, lights came on automatically. Clean. Maintained. Prepared. I walked further in, my eyes scanning everything. You always did like dramatic entrances, I said. Eleanor Carter stepped out from the inner office, composed as ever. And Jason Carter always liked to arrive late. I let out a small breath, almost a smile. So this was all planned? Eleanor Carter tilted her head slightly. Not all. Just enough. I crossed my arms. Then start explaining. Eleanor Carter walked past me, placing a folder on the table. Jason Carter thought the game was about position. I opened it, flipping through documents quickly. It is. No, Eleanor Carter said calmly. It's about control. I looked up. And you have it? A faint pause. Then, I always did. I went through the documents again, slower this time. Shares. Holdings. Hidden accounts. My expression tightened. These aren't listed under the company. Eleanor Carter nodded. They were never meant to be. I looked at her carefully. How much control are we talking about? Eleanor Carter met my gaze without hesitation. Enough to end this whenever we choose. I let out a slow breath, leaning back slightly. You've been holding this the entire time? Watching, Eleanor Carter corrected. Waiting for Jason Carter to see clearly. I shook my head slightly. You could have stopped this earlier. Eleanor Carter's expression didn't change. And Jason Carter would have learned nothing. That hit harder than I expected. I looked down at the papers again. So what now? Eleanor Carter stepped closer, pointing at one of the documents. Now we move carefully. I followed her finger. Daniel Carter's transfers. Weak point, Eleanor Carter said. And Victoria Hale? I asked. Eleanor Carter's lips curved slightly. Overconfidence. I nodded slowly. And Richard Carter? There was a brief silence. Complicated, Eleanor Carter said. I studied her face. That's not an answer. Eleanor Carter looked at me, calm as ever. It's the only one Jason Carter needs right now. I didn't push further. Not yet. So we expose everything? I asked. Eleanor Carter shook her head. No. We let them expose themselves. I frowned slightly. That sounds risky. Eleanor Carter stepped back, folding her arms. Only if Jason Carter reacts. I held her gaze. And if Jason Carter doesn't? A faint smile. Then Jason Carter wins. We spent the next few hours breaking everything down. No wasted words. No emotions. Just facts. Moves. Timing. You'll go back to the board? Eleanor Carter said. I raised an eyebrow. After everything? Yes, Eleanor Carter replied. And Jason Carter will say nothing. I leaned back slightly. That's becoming a theme. It's becoming a weapon, Eleanor Carter corrected. I let out a small breath. And when they push? They will, Eleanor Carter said. And Jason Carter will let them. I shook my head slightly. Feels wrong. Eleanor Carter's voice stayed steady. That's because Jason Carter is used to fighting directly. I nodded once. And this isn't direct. No, Eleanor Carter said. This is controlled. I glanced back at the documents. And the endgame? Eleanor Carter paused for a moment. Simple. Remove them. I looked up. Completely? Completely, Eleanor Carter confirmed. There was no hesitation in her voice. No doubt. That certainty, it changed something inside me. I straightened slightly. All right. Eleanor Carter studied me for a second. Jason Carter understands now. I met her gaze. Yeah. I paused briefly, then added, Jason Carter understands. When we walked into the boardroom later that day, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned. I could feel it. Daniel Carter was already there, standing near the head of the table, mid-conversation. The moment Daniel Carter saw Eleanor Carter, the confidence slipped. Just for a second. But it was enough. I stepped in beside Eleanor Carter, calm, composed. Surprised? I said quietly. Daniel Carter forced a smile. Didn't expect this. Eleanor Carter didn't respond. Just walked forward and took a seat like nothing had changed. That silence hit harder than any words. Victoria Hale stepped in quickly. This meeting wasn't scheduled. Now it is, Eleanor Carter said calmly. The room went still again. I leaned slightly against the table, watching everything unfold. Daniel Carter tried to recover. We're in the middle of stabilizing the company. Eleanor Carter looked at Daniel Carter directly. Then let's talk about what Daniel Carter is stabilizing. A flicker of tension crossed Daniel Carter's face. I'm handling what Jason Carter couldn't. I let out a small breath, almost amused. That's one way to say it. Eleanor Carter didn't look at me. Just kept her eyes on Daniel Carter. Then Daniel Carter won't mind reviewing the numbers together. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I could feel the shift. It was subtle, but it was there. Control. Moving back toward us. I glanced at Daniel Carter again, noticing it clearly this time. The confidence was still there, but now there was something else behind it. Something small. Something new. Fear. I let a faint smile form, controlled and quiet. The game hadn't just changed. It had flipped. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't on the outside anymore. I was exactly where I needed to be. The room felt different the moment I walked in. Not tense. Not uncertain. Controlled. I took my seat without a word, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Daniel Carter was already speaking when I arrived. We need to finalize the restructuring today, Daniel Carter said, voice steady, confident. I leaned back slightly, watching. Go ahead, I said quietly. Daniel Carter paused for a second, just a second, then continued. As acting head, Daniel Carter has already secured acting? I cut in, my tone calm. The room shifted instantly. Daniel Carter looked at me, forced smile still in place. That's the current position. I nodded once. Temporary things have a habit of ending. A few board members exchanged looks. Victoria Hale stepped in smoothly. We're here to discuss the company's stability. I turned my gaze toward Victoria Hale. Good, I said. Then let's talk about what's destabilizing it. Silence followed. Heavy. Expecting. I placed a folder on the table, sliding it forward slightly. Start with that. No one moved at first. Then Marcus Reed cleared his throat quietly. What is this? I met Marcus Reed's eyes. Something that should have been reviewed earlier. Marcus Reed hesitated, then opened the file. The shift in expression was immediate. Subtle, but clear. Daniel Carter noticed it. What's in there? Daniel Carter asked. I didn't answer. I just watched. Marcus Reed flipped another page, then another. These transactions, Marcus Reed muttered. A board member leaned forward. What about them? Marcus Reed looked up slowly. They don't match the reported records. That was enough. The room started moving. Questions. Murmurs. Doubt. I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm. That's just the beginning. Daniel Carter's smile faded slightly. You're making accusations without context. I tilted my head. Then let's add context. I pushed another document forward. External contracts signed through shell accounts. Victoria Hale's expression tightened. Just for a second. Then it disappeared. That's a serious claim, Victoria Hale said smoothly. I nodded. So are falsified reports. A board member spoke sharply. Are you saying these were approved internally? I met his gaze. Look at the signatures. Silence again. Then pages turning. Faster now. More urgent. Daniel Carter's voice came out firmer. These documents haven't been verified. I let out a small breath. They have. I glanced at Marcus Reed. Care to confirm? Marcus Reed hesitated. Then quietly, the data appears consistent. That was it. The first crack. Daniel Carter stepped forward slightly. Even if these are accurate, this doesn't prove intent. I smiled faintly. You're right. I paused just enough to hold attention. So let's prove intent. I tapped the table lightly. Olivia Brooks stepped in, placing a tablet in front of the board. Internal logs, I said. Time-stamped approvals. The room went silent again as the data loaded. Names, dates, transfers, patterns, clear, undeniable. Victoria Hale spoke again, sharper this time. This could be manipulated. I looked at Victoria Hale directly. Then challenge it. No response. That silence, louder than anything else. A board member turned toward Daniel Carter. These approvals are under your authority. Daniel Carter's jaw tightened slightly. As part of operational adjustments. I leaned back. That's one way to describe it. Another voice cut in. Why weren't these disclosed? Daniel Carter didn't answer immediately. That hesitation cost him. Victoria Hale stepped in again, trying to regain control. This meeting is getting off track. I shook my head slightly. No. It's finally on track. I placed one last document on the table. Final piece. Marcus Reed picked it up, eyes scanning quickly. Then stopping. This connects everything. The room shifted again. Stronger this time. Daniel Carter saw it. So did Victoria Hale. Control was slipping. Daniel Carter's voice came out sharper now. This is a coordinated attempt to undermine leadership. I looked at Daniel Carter, calm as ever. Leadership built on lies deserves to be questioned. Victoria Hale stepped forward. You're overstepping. I met Victoria Hale's gaze. No. Just correcting. A board member spoke firmly now. We need an explanation. Silence followed. Long, heavy. Daniel Carter tried to speak, but the confidence was gone. Replaced by something else. Pressure. These decisions were made for the company's benefit, Daniel Carter said. Weak. Uncertain. Not enough. Victoria Hale didn't speak this time. That was new. I watched it happen. The shift. Subtle at first, then undeniable. Board members leaning away. Questions turning into accusations. Support fading. I didn't interrupt. I didn't push. I just let it unfold. This can't continue, one of them said. We need a full audit. Another voice followed, effective immediately. Daniel Carter looked around the room, searching for support. There wasn't any left. Victoria Hale finally spoke, but the control was gone. This is premature. No one agreed. That was the moment it ended. Not with a fight. Not with a shout. Just silence. I leaned back slightly, my hands resting calmly as everything collapsed in front of me. Daniel Carter looked at me then. Not confident. Not controlled. Just aware. You planned this, Daniel Carter said quietly. I held his gaze. No, I replied. You did. Victoria Hale didn't even look at me. That told me everything. I stood up slowly, adjusting my jacket. No rush. No emotion. Just control. You should have stopped earlier, I said calmly. No response. I turned slightly, glancing across the room one last time. The same people who had questioned me were now questioning them. The same silence that had worked against me now worked for me. I took a step back, giving them space. Letting the outcome settle. Letting reality take over. I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need to prove anything else. It was already done. As I walked toward the door, I paused for just a second, my voice low but clear. This wasn't about revenge. I glanced back briefly. This was about truth. Then I stepped out, leaving everything behind me. Not because I lost, but because I didn't need to stay anymore. The silence after everything collapsed felt heavier than the chaos before it. I stood in the same boardroom, but this time no one questioned me. No whispers. No doubt. Just quiet acceptance. Eleanor Carter stepped forward first, placing a final document on the table. "This confirms controlling shares," Eleanor Carter said calmly. A board member picked it up, scanning quickly. "This gives Jason Carter majority authority." I didn't move. I just watched. Daniel Carter sat there, no confidence left, no arguments ready. "You hid this," one of them said. Eleanor Carter didn't react. "It wasn't hidden," Eleanor Carter replied. "It was protected." I finally spoke, my voice steady. "And now it's clear." The room shifted again, but this time, in my favor. A vote was called without resistance. Hands raised. One after another. No hesitation. "Effective immediately," Marcus Reed said, "Jason Carter is reinstated as the primary heir and acting head." I let out a slow breath, but my expression didn't change. I had imagined this moment before. It didn't feel loud. It felt final. Daniel Carter looked at me, eyes searching for something. Maybe a reaction. Maybe anger. "So that's it?" Daniel Carter asked quietly. I met his gaze. It was always going to end like this. Daniel Carter shook his head slightly. "You think you won?" I didn't answer immediately. I stepped closer, my tone calm. "No," I said. "You lost." That silence hit harder than anything else I could have said. Victoria Hale wasn't even there anymore. Gone before the end. That told me everything. I turned slightly as footsteps approached behind me. Sophia Bennett stopped beside me, her presence calm but steady. "It's over," Sophia Bennett said softly. I nodded once. "Yeah." I glanced at Daniel Carter one last time. "You had every chance." No response came. There was nothing left to say. I stepped back, giving space as the board began formal procedures. I didn't need to stay for that part. Not anymore. As I moved toward the door, I heard my name. "Jason." I stopped. Slowly I turned. Richard Carter stood there, looking older than I remembered. Tired. Regret clear in his eyes. "We need to talk," Richard Carter said quietly. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I shook my head slightly. "No," I replied. My voice didn't rise. It didn't break. "We don't." Richard Carter stepped forward slightly. "Jason Carter," I cut him off, calm but firm. "Some things don't get fixed with words." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. I turned away without waiting for another response. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. I walked down the steps slowly, not rushing, not looking back. Sophia Bennett stayed beside me. "You didn't even hesitate," Sophia Bennett said. I glanced at Sophia Bennett briefly. There was nothing left to hesitate about. Sophia Bennett nodded slightly. "Still, that couldn't have been easy." I let out a small breath. "It wasn't." A short pause followed. Then Sophia Bennett spoke again. "So what now?" I stopped for a second, looking up at the building. The same place that once felt like it was slipping away from me, now stood in front of me, fully mine. "Now," I repeated quietly. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The silence. The shift. Then I looked forward again. Now I build something real. Sophia Bennett smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." I returned a small smile. "It is." We walked forward again, steady, no rush, no weight pulling me back anymore. Later that evening, I stood alone in the office that once felt distant. The city lights stretched out in front of me, but this time, I wasn't watching from the outside. I was part of it. I adjusted my jacket slightly, my reflection staring back at me in the glass. Calm, focused, different. "Not the same person," I said quietly. The door opened behind me. Eleanor Carter stepped in, as composed as always. "That's the point," Eleanor Carter said. I didn't turn right away. "You knew this would happen." "I knew Jason Carter would get here," Eleanor Carter replied. I finally turned, meeting her gaze. "You waited a long time." Eleanor Carter nodded once. "So did you." I let out a small breath, then looked back at the city. "It's done." "No," Eleanor Carter said calmly. "It started." I smiled faintly at that. "Yeah," I said. "It has." Silence settled between us, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was steady. Controlled. Mine. I didn't just take back a title. I took back control. And as I stood there, looking over everything that once rejected me, I realized something simple. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the moment it truly began.